Welcome to Accelerated. I'm your host, Vitaly Golomb. On this second season of the podcast, we are hearing from some of the global leaders in everything electric and autonomous, moving us quickly into the future. On this episode, we speak with Andrés De León, the CEO of Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. He first joined the company as its chief operating officer before taking the helm in 2019. Prior to Hyperloop, he built an illustrious career leading many initiatives in energy and infrastructure around the world. We talked about how the crazy idea of Hyperloop became a full-fledged industry, HyperloopTT's unique crowdsourcing and business models, key technologies that had to be developed, and most importantly, when we can hitch a ride on a Hyperloop pod at the speed of sound. Here's our conversation with Andrés. Andrés, thank you very much for being on Accelerated. It has been my pleasure to work alongside you for quite a while now, and I think the company has a fascinating story, and you do personally. So wanted to share that with the listeners today. So why don't we start at the beginning? Tell us a little bit about your career and how you became the CEO of HyperloopTT.
Well, I started my professional career in a financial department of a construction company, a big multinational company in Spain, while I was studying law. Then when I finalized my study, I continued working there, and I did an MBA from the Instituto de Empresa. There is a famous university in Spain, a management university. And from there, I was there until I became deputy CFO, and then I was hired by a big industrial group in Spain, Ergon Group, to become the new general manager, to become the new CEO. And I was there working in different parts of the world. I was running the US operations first in Vermont, then I come back to Europe, and I ran the whole organization from Spain. We had it was an industrial corporation with factories in Spain, in US, and also commercial operations in South America and also in Europe. And there, when I was much younger than today, I met Dirk Alborn, the founder of HyperloopTT, because I bought 51% of one of his companies in Italy. Okay, so we started our relation there. Then basically he went to live to US, and we bought the rest of the company. And I left this group, and I started my own venture with some investors. We create an industrial group with operations in Europe, in South America, and also in America. And finally, what happened is that some years later, I reconnected with Dirk. Dirk explained me about the amazing project that he was working on, so I decided to close some of my business, to sell other part, and to concentrate on this opportunity. I thought that it was amazing, not only what they were doing, or what we were trying to do, but also how we were doing it. And, so I was one of the first contributors. I became the CEO very soon. And then after 5 years working, we decided that the company was at a completely different stage where it needed more industrial background, industrial experience, construction. So we decided that I became the CEO and Dirk becomes the chairman of the company.
So it's a very fast forward through your career, through your illustrious career. Now, so most people have heard of Hyperloop. Probably everybody's heard of Hyperloop, but all they know, really, most people, is that Elon Musk published a white paper in 2013. Tell us what happened next, and how do we get to 2021?
Well, when Elon published the document and the white paper, he said that he had no time to develop it, to develop this project, and he encouraged other companies to do it. We were part of an incubator funded by NASA and Girvan Institute, build companies in a completely different way, to build companies using crowdsourcing. So what happened to us is that we thought that this was a great idea, to put it in the platform. So we put the project in the platform, we do a call to action, And immediately we have like 200 people around the world that were really interested about collaborating with us and helping us. So, long story short, today we've got more than 800 people. We've got more than 50 companies collaborating with us. We have the biggest crowdsourcing platform in the world. We have been defined by Harvard Business School like the new way of building companies of the 21st century. And of course, we have been working a lot, to arrive to the point that we are ready to build the Hyperloop. And that's basically the history of these 7 years that the company has been working, and that has bring us to a moment that we are basically very, very focused on our next commercial prototype. That will be the first time that a real commercial prototype will be built.
So I want to come back to this unique crowd development structure that the company has pioneered, and HBS, Harvard Business School, has done 2 studies on already. But I guess the big question that everybody has is, when can they buy a ticket and ride the Hyperloop? When do you think that's going to happen finally?
Well, as I was saying before, right now we are working to do the first commercial prototype. It's 5 kilometers with an advanced mobility center. We are working towards the financing of the whole project. So if everything goes well and we are capable to finalize our funding, for, I'd say, in the next 3 to 4 months or 5 months, then basically we need 2 years to build this first commercial prototype. And in this first commercial prototype, it's not going to be just a test track. It's going to be commercial, and we want to have people riding the Hyperloop. So people will be able to go there to buy a ticket and to ride the first Hyperloop that humanity has developed. So I'd say that we are 2.5, maximum 3 years away from that. And that's where we would like, to have all kind of people around the world traveling and visiting and seeing this opportunity.
So I think for most people, it's gonna be a little bit of a surprise that in 2 to 3 years they'll be actually able to ride a Hyperloop. Let's talk a little bit about, they've heard of Hyperloop, but let's talk about the experience. What is a Hyperloop? What can they experience? What can they expect to experience as a passenger on the system?
Well, we have been working very hard to create a new mode of transportation, that can improve drastically the passenger experience. I think that everybody understands that in today's world, or before the pandemic, we were traveling just because we have to travel, but nobody enjoyed the experience anymore. Traveling is not a funny thing. Just arriving to destination was the nice thing to do. So we have improved drastically that. We want to create this kind of naked passenger experience that we call it, that you could go from point A to point B fully naked without nothing, with a very seamless experience, And basically, people, when we are trying that people can go through the station again with this frictionless experience. And then traveling the capsule is not going to be very different than traveling in an airplane. Okay, of course, a human body feels the acceleration, so we are trying to keep the acceleration in the range, that is good for human body, and that you don't have any side effects, And it will be very, very similar to be traveling in an airplane, but it's an airplane that goes in the ground, in a low pressure environment, that basically we duplicate or we replicate, what is the environment of an airplane flying at high altitude.
And speeds, it's actually faster than commercial airlines fly.
Yeah, our system has been developed from the beginning, thinking to, with the idea of arrive to 1,200 kilometers per hour. So basically that means that, yes, it will be faster than an airplane. But I have to say also that the average speed will be more in the 800. Okay, so it's going to be very similar. Yeah, 800 kilometers an hour. So it's going to be very similar in terms of timing to airplanes, but of course going from city center to city center. So it's going to be a much more efficient use of our time.
Now, in California, for a long time, there was a project to do high-speed rail, and ultimately it failed because every little town that the rail was going through, they wanted to stop, even if it's a 500-person farming little village, let's say. And it didn't work out, and the cost just skyrocketed. How is HyperloopTT going to solve something like that? So, for example, this dream of going from San Francisco downtown to Los Angeles in 40 minutes at these speeds, city center to city center, like you said. But how do you deal with kind of the right of way and the construction, all these nuances and bureaucracy and all these pieces? What makes HyperloopTT different?
Well, I think that what makes Hyperloop TT system different is that it's a much more smaller infrastructure. It's more adaptable to the terrain. We go on pylons, so we don't split the territory in two. We are also analyzing the infrastructure from the point of view that when we are in the city, we create something that is nice for the environment. So instead of splitting the neighborhoods in two, we are trying to make that the infrastructure is kind of like the river in the history of humanity, a place where people can live around and, can use it. We're giving additional uses to the infrastructure like bike paths, like vertical gardening, things that we believe that will improve drastically the public acceptance of an infrastructure like that. That being said, it's clear that when you are thinking a corridor, you are thinking an infrastructure corridor. So you need to have, you need to convince the communities and you need to convince the governments, that this is a good solution. But the main advantage of the Hyperloop in relation with high-speed rail basically is there are two main advantages. No? First of all, in the Hyperloop TT system, we are talking about a system that is fully sustainable. We generate more energy than we consume, and we generate that energy based on renewable energy. So we are talking of the first mode of transportation in the history of humanity that is going to be net zero emissions in terms of carbon emissions. Okay? But in addition to that, and very important, we're talking about a system that is profitable by itself, doesn't rely on public subsidies. So it could be fully financed by private initiative and has a payback period that makes sense, that the private initiatives can finance and it still make a good return, on their investment. I come from a country that is Spain, that is the second biggest country in the world in kilometers of high-speed rail. It's also, after China, it's also, of all the European countries, is the one with the lowest capex per kilometer. The line that is more successful is Madrid-Barcelona. Madrid-Barcelona has a payback period of 100 years. Whether in the study that we have done, in the feasibility study that we did in Great Lakes for Cleveland, Chicago, Pittsburgh connection, we're talking that in 25 years we could have the payback period. So, it's trying to summarize, it's an infrastructure that is more sustainable, it's more adapted to the terrain and adapted to the communities, it's smaller, and is much more efficient, and from the point of view of profitability, is much more profitable than the high-speed rail.
Yeah, I mean, it's from the standpoint of infrastructure, and that's kind of a complicated topic on its own. Most people don't know how infrastructure projects get financed and built and all of that, so I wanted to come back to that in a second. I'm really excited to share something a long time in the making with you. My first online course. Over the years, I've trained thousands of founders through my book, Accelerated Startup, and my infamous Pitching Like a Boss workshops and keynotes. Like I've done for thousands of founders, I will teach you how to pitch like a boss. And for the first time ever, I will be doing it in a cohort-based online course. This is the world's most comprehensive and intensive course for entrepreneurs and future founders on pitching. It will help you craft the perfect pitch for investors and customers. It will also help you master public speaking. Get funded, communicate your vision to grow your team, and dramatically improve sales of any product. Check out golomb.net/pitching, that's golomb.net/pitching for more information. See you there. Talk a little bit about the propulsion system, the vacuum environment. How do all these things work together?
So basically, what we do is we create a low pressure environment. It's not fully vacuum, it's a low pressure environment. And because we create this low pressure environment, we don't have the resistance, the air resistance, and we don't have to play against the aerodynamics. And basically, what happened is that we can move the capsule in a much simpler way and with with less energy consumption. Okay, our system is based in a linear synchronous motor for the propulsion, and we have our own proprietary passive magnetic levitation technology. This passive magnetic levitation technology was developed in the 90s in Lawrence Livermore lab. We took it. The team that developed it, started to work with us, Richard Porse and his team, and they were part of our crowd. And what we did is we adapted to a low pressure environment, and we solved some of the problems that they had in the past. Okay, it's a system that is very, very interesting because you don't need to electrify the track in order to levitate. The levitation is based on the motion. You have permanent magnets over an aluminum track, that create this levitation without the need of energy. So basically, we're talking about a tube with a low pressure environment. Instead of a train, a capsule that can carry from 32 to 50 people, and that is propelled by a linear synchronous motor and then has passive magnetic levitation to continue levitate.
So the capsule itself is maybe like a small airplane, 30 to 50 people, but closer to like a bus, right? That's the capacity of a bus.
Yeah, basically it's like a small jet or a small airplane, or like a bus. And that's also very good because you can adapt. You can put a capsule in the tube every 40 seconds. The headway is every 40 seconds, but in the peak hour. But of course, outside of the peak hour, you could be putting the capsule every 15 minutes. You would be giving a very, very good service to the communities, and you have a good level of occupancy on the system. That's one of the biggest problems of high-speed rail. That when you are in the peak hour is full, but then outside of the peak hour, you are talking that maybe you have occupancies of 40% or something like that. So the overall occupancy is no more than 60, even 70. So in our case, we can adapt the capsules and the frequency of the capsules. We can adapt it to the demand. And even more important than that, there will be some capsules that could go from point A to point C, and others can go to point B to point D, So basically, depending on the demand that you have on the capsule, you can solve also that problem that you were talking before about how do you serve, the small communities. Of course, it's not about stopping every second. It's more about adapting, the travel to the demand that you have in the station at that moment.
So the idea is that you have tubes that go each direction, and then you have these exit tubes for different stations. So you can really schedule very quickly and very tightly. You can schedule a lot of different. It sounds. I think we're getting this point across. It sounds more like a roller coaster, loading a roller coaster very quickly, and as soon as it's full, you can let it go. And then you wait for the next one. But here, you can load it very quickly. It's not as big as even a small airplane that loads 170 people in a 737.
Yeah, basically in our station you could load the people every 7 minutes, and you have different capsules being loaded at the same time. And every 40 seconds you can put the capsule in the tube. It's not going to be the same experience that a roller coaster because, as I was saying before, we are trying to.
You won't feel it.
Yeah, you won't feel it. You will not have an acceleration like in a roller coaster or something like that. And the most important thing of the whole system is the efficiency. It's not only the speed and how that is the overall efficiency of the system. That has been our main focus: overall efficiency and sustainability.
So the system is covered in photovoltaics, and talk a little bit about the energy use and the difference with the maglev that people know that is electric but uses a lot of energy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how Hyperloop is the reverse of that.
Yeah, but look, maglev is a great product, but only has one problem. You need to electrify all the track, and you have a very high consumption of energy. Okay, very high consumption of energy. So basically, one of the biggest problems of the maglet have been that, the train in Japan, every year they have some problems of maintaining the average speed. And again, you need to, it's not only that you need to have a lot of consumption of energy, it's that you need to have a very stable source of energy or you start to have problems. Okay. Our technology is completely different. From conception, at the end of the day, what you are doing is when you are reducing the the air, from the tube, you are creating this low pressure environment. So first of all, when a train moves, I'd say that 85, 90% of the energy consumption is because on the aerodynamics. Okay, whether here you are using a small part of the energy to create the vacuum that is not very expensive and not very it's not very big in terms of energy consumption. Okay, and then you don't have that resistance from the aerodynamics. In addition to that, we are levitating without the need to electrify the track because we have this passive magnetic levitation, system. So that allows us that we will need to electrify the track only in the areas where we will have propulsion. Okay, so basically that reduces drastically also the consumption of energy.
And the pods themselves have the battery, right?
Yeah, the pod has the battery, but the battery serves basically to the main elements of the pods, to the to the different elements, the air life system, and the different systems that require energy. That you have the battery on the pod. Today, the batteries of today they are not developed well enough, to be able to do the propulsion of an Hyperloop system. But our view is that that will change in the future. Our battery technology is changing drastically, and that could change very soon. Okay, at that moment we will be able to propel the system from the batteries, and it will be even cheaper and more simple. No, but today we rely on a linear synchronous motor, on the track to propel the capsule.
Very good. And then the experience inside the pod. Obviously, the tubes are sealed. There's no sunshine in the tubes, and then of course the pod has nothing to look at. There's no windows, which there are no windows, and that's a big advantage as far as cost of building it. But what are the customers, for those 30, 40 minutes that they're in a capsule? What are they looking at? What's that experience like?
Well, that was one of. It's very curious you talk about it because that was one of our main first questions. When we started to develop this, no, what is going to be the sensation of the people to go in a place that has no window? So we basically decided to duplicate an environment that people is used to, and we developed what we call it Augmented Windows. Augmented Windows is a patent that a product, that we developed where basically you have some windows based on augmented reality and virtual reality windows. And with a motion tracking, when you move your head, you have the different perspective. Could be even a multi-viewer system. So depending on who wants to see one thing, you could be seeing what is happening outside of the tube, or you could be, or the passenger that is close to you could be looking at, and travel through Jurassic Park. So it's also a way of entertaining and all of that. What has been very curious about this is that we have discovered also that this technology could be applied to other modes of transportation because windows are a problem. No? Every time that you do a hole in a structure, you need to reinforce and you need to gain more weight. Okay, but with this system, we allow to have a fuselage for the capsule that is much more simple. Okay, and that we don't need to reinforce with around the windows. And then we have this very light system, of augmented reality windows or virtual reality windows that works quite well.
And you don't have to do a small window. You can do the whole capsule if you wanted to, like a flexible OLED. Yeah.
Absolutely, you can do. We have different flexible configurations because the whole idea of how do we think about the capsule is we are trying also to innovate there. No, we don't want to create We don't believe that you need to categorize the traveling business first, tourists. We believe that you need to categorize the travel in what are you doing, in that moment. You are a completely different person when you are traveling with friends to see a soccer match, for instance, or when you are traveling with your family and your kids, or when you are traveling with colleagues, with your peers, your work peers, and you want to work and you want to have a video conference at the same time that you are talking. So we believe in the multi-purpose space. So we have developed around with Principal and Goody and with some of the big, designers companies in the world, a completely different use of the space.
I can't wait for the Disney partnership, and you can go out into Star Wars world and shoot in the Hyperloop from San Francisco here to LA to Disneyland and start the Disneyland experience early.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you can apply the same thing in aviation. There's been a lot of the windows have always been a problem. They had a lot of weight to the planes and all these issues, and for a long time they've been concepts, but sounds like Hyperloop's technology can be applied to that. It already exists.
Definitely, a lot of our technologies related to passenger experience can be applied to the actual modes of transportation. For instance, we have one of the top rail manufacturers in Europe, applying to HS2. The part that had to do with passenger experience was based on some of our technologies. So definitely, could be applied to rail, could be applied to airplanes, could be applied to buses. So some of the findings and of the technology discoveries and of the technology developments that we have done through these 7 years can be definitely applied to the legacy transportation business.
When companies start to catch fire in blitzscale and look for capital to fuel that growth or look to find the right exit strategy, they often seek the counsel of investment bankers. At Drakestar Partners, we work with some of the leading companies in global tech on capital raises, M&A, corporate carve-outs, SPACs, and much more. And we're pretty good at it. Our team of over 100 technology sector experts across 9 offices in 6 countries is comprised of not only career bankers, but experienced executive venture investors and technologists. Drakestar Partners is the #1 ranked and fastest growing mid-market investment bank across US and Europe. While I focus on mobility and energy transition sector, along with all things Silicon Valley, my partners from the Pacific to the Atlantic and around the world lead in software, media, communications, and everything in between. Learn more about us at drakestar.com. Now, I want to come back to the business model and to the development model of HyperloopTT because it's highly unique. I mean, normally company, team has an idea and a hot market. They go raise some money and they go start hiring people and solving those problems and, and building the solution. In the case of HyperloopTT, it was always a relatively small team, and even today, as far as I understand. And there was a crowd element that you talked about a little bit. Talk a little bit more about how this came about, how does it work, and how do you interact, and what kind of people you were able to get involved in this project?
Well, this is really one of the parts that I like more about this project, how we are doing it. The crowd is very, very powerful because at the end of the day, what you have is you have the experience of people, that sometimes a normal startup cannot access to this kind of people. You don't have access to this kind of people. No matter that you are well financed or well funded, there are some kind of people that they want to take the risk, to leave their job and work in a startup environment. But if you go to them and you say you don't need to stop your work, you have been working for 30 years in a big corporation or whatever, great, fantastic. Just give me 10 hours of your time every week, to give us your experience and your capabilities. So that's very, very powerful because at the end of the day, first of all, you are not limited by the cash burning of the company, because you are creating value. So you could have different projects at the same time for solving this one of the problems, and you are always learning and you are always creating value, and you are As you are creating value, you are sharing that value with the people that is creating that value, giving them equity, giving them stock options of the project. So basically, you have a system that you don't have the limitation of the cash burning, okay? So you could go much faster, and you leverage on the expertise of the people. So of course, you arrive much faster, to conclusions. Like that, if you see ourselves basically with one third of the money that our biggest competitor has raised, we are fighting with them, in the development of the technology. But even more important than just individuals, we have applied also these systems to companies, no? And we have more than 50 companies that has been collaborating with us in different moments, or are collaborating right now with us in exchange of equity of the project. And that's very powerful, because then you don't have only the expertise of the people, you have the expertise plus all the support of the organization and an internal way of working. And so you learn a lot from this radical collaboration. So we are building the Hyperloop like this, and I think that has been a clear reason why we have been able in 7 years, to be ready to build, okay, a complete Hyperloop commercial system.
And in total, so you have about 150 people in the company, plus 800 individual contributors, plus 50 companies that have contributed IP and are active partners to HTT. I mean, that's a big community. It sounds like you've built more of an industry and not just a company at this point.
Definitely, we are building an industry. Well, first of all, we have built the biggest crowdsourcing platform in the world, no? But we are building an industry, and each of our technological partners, when they collaborate with us, they co-develop the technology together with us. We retain the IP of that technology because we are paying with equity of the whole project. But they will be the ones later on, selling parts of the technology to the final customers, because we, it's not only how we are doing it. Our business model is to be a technology license or a network orchestrator. So we will be licensing the technology to the infrastructure operator and to the transportation operators. And we will have, the technological companies that will be our technological partners will be the one providing the goods, So that's a model that is a win-to-win, and that is working very well, and that has allowed us to accelerate drastically, in the development of the technology.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about the business model. When trains were first being developed across Europe and US, the companies, they built their own railroads, their own private railroads, and they own that infrastructure. We're not in 1800s anymore, so it's a little bit more difficult to get right away and all these things happening. Talk a little bit about the business model for HTT and why you chose to do it this way, and what are the advantages of doing this versus trying to do everything yourself and own the tracks and own the pods and run the service and everything else?
Well, we wanted to create a company that was very efficient from the point of view of capital use, and that could give a very good profitability and return on investment to our investors. Okay, so if you are familiarized with this concept of network orchestrator, basically we are kind of like the Uber of the Hyperloop, no, or the Airbnb of the Hyperloop industry that we are creating. So we have a low asset, we are very lean. We don't have a lot of assets, and we can be very efficient in the way that we commercialize. So from one side, we have this financial side of the equation, that we make a company much more attractive from the point of view of investors. Okay. But second, and even more important, this accelerate drastically the implementation of the Hyperloop. At the end of the day, everybody that is in HyperloopTT, we have one goal, that is seeing the Hyperloop build it around the world. Okay, and in order to do that, instead of us having to deploy tons of capital, tons of structure, of companies around the world, we decided that the same way that we have built the technology together with our technological partners, we can implement the technology together with our commercial partners. And in this implementation, we can use the public or private infra companies, companies like ADIF, SNCF, Deutsche Bahn, or companies like Ferrovial, ACS, Vinci, can be our partners, on the infrastructure side. And then these companies could be selling slots to different transportation companies. That could be any airline that today is operating, could be a transportation company for the Hyperloop, any rail company, any bus, operator. Could be these kind of companies could have this back. So basically, what we are doing is, instead of competing with all of them, we are giving them the opportunity to use our technology and to deploy in their areas, in the regions, that they are very strong, to deploy the technology together with us. So, and that will accelerate the implementation of the Hyperloop systems, and it's creating for us a business model that is very, very efficient, a light asset business model with all the advantage of the infrastructure projects, that is like big revenues, long-term revenues, and, very, very strong customers, but without the disadvantage of having to deploy by ourselves the structure, the capital, and all of that to deploy this.
Yeah, very stable business when you're talking about something that's planned to be operating for decades and decades. So United Airlines just made some news that they have committed to buy some Boom supersonic passenger jets for their cross-Atlantic journeys. It sounds like United Airlines could one day be operating within Hyperloop.
Definitely, definitely. I think that all the airlines around the world, they need to think in the Hyperloop, and all the transportation companies, they need to think in the Hyperloop as an opportunity, not as a threat, to their business. Especially if they collaborate with HyperloopTT, our model is that, So we are open to collaborate with all of them, and they could become, an important stakeholders, of this new industry.
Yeah, and it's a big win-win because you don't need to have loud, polluting planes that are flying relatively short distances, taking off and landing and all these things.
Absolutely. That's something that, by the way, is already happening. In France has already banned the travels in the short haul flights. Less than 2 hours or 3 hours that the cities are connected by high speed rail, you cannot fly anymore. They are talking about the same in Germany and in different countries of the European Union, and it's going to happen. So basically, we have a system like the Hyperloop that can connect the cities from city center to city center in 2 to 3 hours. Continental travel for airplanes will make only sense in the routes that doesn't have economical sense to build a complete infrastructure. But in the main routes, will not make a lot of sense.
How far how far does that go? Can we go, for example, coast to coast in the US, or is that a little too long? What do you think?
No, definitely we can do it. We have experience that I always put as a sample. We know that people, right now, when you think about high-speed rail against airplanes, when you connect a city for less than 3 hours, basically people wants to take the train, and they don't take the flight. Okay, 3 hours city center to city center. That. But of course, we are talking about something that 3 hours could be 600 kilometers. Okay, 3 hours with the Hyperloop, you'd be talking about 2,000 kilometers. Okay, or even more. Okay, so we are in hours competing with the airplanes. So we believe that the long distance make perfect sense too, because at the end of the day, you are gonna be competing with airplane speed, even with a much more efficient way of arriving to the station, because the station will be in the city center. So that's that.
No need for big airports and all the big runways and all that land that's wasted right now. No, it's fascinating. I hope to be able to get on a Hyperloop and go to New York for dinner from San Francisco in not so distant future. One other thing I want to talk about is the Hyperport. So it's a much lesser known part of something that HyperloopTT has been developing, but it makes perfect sense. Talk a little bit about what is Hyperport and why you're working on that as well.
Yeah, we Hyperport. We did a joint venture with the Port of Hamburg to develop the Hyperport. Hyperport is the Hyperloop of containers. Okay, basically, in the normal Hyperloop, we can also move goods, ULDs and pallets and parcels, But when we want to move containers, you need a specific configuration. So basically, Hyperport is the Hyperloop of containers plus the interface with the port operations. So today we have a big congestion in a lot of ports around the world, and we feel that there is a great opportunity to create inland ports, even inland ports very close to the center of the countries or the regions that they are serving, and connected that from the seaport. So you don't need to have too much land devoted to the port operations, that normally they are in the middle of the city centers. You don't need to have a lot of trucks going through the city, to arrive there, like the problems that you have in Los Angeles, on beach or the port of Los Angeles. And these kind of problems you could solve it, putting all the logistic operations on inside of the territory, and connected with a very simple connection of a hyperport system that could move containers and put containers in the system again every 40 seconds.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, you can solve a lot of the, maybe not the last mile, let's say, but everything just about to it. You can shoot the containers out into the middle of the country, let's say somewhere in Europe, if we're talking about going from port to kind of more landlocked part of it. But most importantly, I guess for me, is that you're freeing up a lot of that very expensive, very nice coastal real estate for people to live in.
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's a very good way to see it. At the end of the day, you have cities that they have a lot of land devoted to port operations that could be used for a much nicer way of use. In front of the sea, definitely.
Some of the most valuable land here in California, that's for sure. Now, through all of this, it's been quite a journey for you and the entire team. You've had a lot of challenges. What's the biggest challenge you've had in realizing this vision so far?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge, if you ask me this question like 1 year ago, I would tell you that, or even before the pandemic, I would tell you regulation. Okay. But fortunately for us, with the great wave and then with all the problems that has happened with the pandemic, all the governments around the world, they have realized that Hyperloop is a good opportunity, and we are advancing a lot in terms of regulatory environment with the Department of Transportation of US and also with the European Commission with DG Move. The European Commission has put Hyperloop as one of the possible systems, to boost economy and renewable energy, renewable infrastructure in the European environment. The Department of Transportation in US, they have developed a pathway to commercialization, for a document. So we have advanced a lot on that. So my biggest fear that was that the regulation could not advance as fast as technology. I think that is not happening, and we can feel that in a couple of years, 3 years more, maximum, we will be able to have regulatory frameworks around the world. So I think that with that problem solved, I'd say that right now, basically for us, it's about funding the initiative. No, that's definitely something that everybody talks about sustainability. Everybody talks about financing the right things to do and all of that. But at the end, it's not so easy. So, but it's working. We have been able to finance all our operations until today, and now we are working on financing our commercial prototype. But definitely, that's always a challenge.
Yeah, financing big projects like this is not just a software startup that you can finance an app. It's definitely a much bigger vision. Even with this crowdsourced model, it still takes a lot of fuel to get there. Now, I wanted to ask one last question and kind of bring it back to your personal side. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given your 20-something-year-old self at the beginning of your career?
Wow, that's a very good question. Look, I'd say stop every 5 years and understand if you are in the right sector, and if your capabilities, your experience, and everything that you can give to the world, is being used properly because you are in the right sector, in the right company, and all of that. I'd say that if I have to give uh, an advice to my kids, I already have kids of 21 years old. Okay, so would be that. No, first of all, do what you like. That's clear, but it's really really important to stop every. I'm not gonna say every year. That's crazy. In your professional career, you need to have some time to develop things. No, but I would say that every 5 years you need to sit down, talk to yourself, and say first what I'm doing is something that I'm enjoying, and second, and very very important, am I in the right sector? Am I in the right company? To develop all my skills and all my capabilities, and to be sure that I'm giving to society everything that I can do. And I think that has been um, a clear thing that I have learned, especially in these last 7 years, no, where I have found a project that is really amazing, that really can change the world, and that has changed drastically also my life.
This was our conversation with Andrés De León, the CEO of Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars in your favorite podcast platform and share with your friends. See you on the next one, and in the meantime, you can always find me at golomb.net.